For 400 years, the most powerful man in the world sat on a golden chair. And underneath that chair, 11 feet down, something enormous was breathing. Every emperor knew, every single emperor knew exactly what he was sitting on, and not one of them ever dared to stand up. This story comes from China, which tells you almost nothing, because China is not a place so much as it is 4,000 years of places. The version I'm going to tell you was collected in the south, in the river towns below the mountains, and it was told, this is the part I want you to hold on to, it was told in the years after a dynasty had fallen. It is a story that the survivors of a collapsed empire told each other about why the empire collapsed. Now, in Chinese folklore, the dragon is not the dragon of the West. It is not a monster in a cave hoarding gold. The Chinese dragon, the Long, is a creature of water and weather. It is rivers, it is rain, it is the living force that makes the crops come up and the floods come down. And the emperor, in the old belief, was the one human being on earth permitted to use the dragon as his symbol. The emperor was the dragon. That was the whole idea of an emperor. So when the storytellers of the river towns wanted to explain what had really happened to the throne, what power really is, and what it costs, and what it is built on top of, they did not reach for a metaphor. They reached for an actual dragon. There was a young man named Wen. Wen had come to the capital to take the great examinations, the brutal written tests that in old China were the one narrow door through which a poor man's son could walk into the government and change the fortune of his family for 1,000 years. Wen had failed them 3 times. He was clever, genuinely, unusually clever, but he was also poor and hungry and far from home, and the examination halls of the capital are not kind to the clever poor. So Wen took the only work a failed scholar could get. He became a night clerk in the lowest cellars of the Imperial Archive, the vast buried library beneath the palace where the records of the empire were stored in their tens of thousands of scrolls. His job was simple. All night, alone, by the light of one oil lamp, he was to walk the deepest aisles of the archive and check that no scroll had been eaten by damp or by insects or by rats. And it was on his 9th night in the lowest cellar of all, the oldest one, the one that smelled of cold stone and river, that Wen noticed something he was not meant to notice. The floor was warm. A floor 11 levels beneath the surface of the earth should not be warm. It should be the opposite. The deeper you go, in an ordinary building, the colder and the wetter the stone becomes. Wen had walked these cellars for 9 nights, and every night his feet had been cold. But here, in this one aisle, the aisle directly, he would later realize, beneath the center of the throne room far above, the flagstones gave off a faint, steady heat, like the side of a sleeping animal, like a body. And there was the sound. Wen knelt, and he put his ear against the warm stone, and under the stone, far under it, he heard a sound that he had been hearing faintly for 9 nights, without ever once letting himself notice it. It was slow. It was vast. It came and then it went, came and then it went, with the patient, enormous, unhurried rhythm of something breathing in its sleep. Wen was a scholar. He did not believe, at first, what his own ear was telling him. So he did the thing a scholar does. He went looking for the records. Every archive has a shelf that the clerks are told not to read. In the Imperial Archive, it was the highest shelf of the deepest aisle, and the scrolls upon it were bound not in ordinary cord, but in cord dyed the forbidden imperial yellow. To open one without permission was, by law, a capital crime. It would cost Wen his head. Wen stood at the foot of the ladder for a long time, and then he thought about his 3 failed examinations. He thought about his hunger. He thought about how very little the Empire had ever offered him, and how little it would miss one cold, clever, disappointed night clerk. And he climbed the ladder. The scroll he took down was 400 years old. It was the founding record of the dynasty itself, the account written by the very first emperor's own court of how the capital had been chosen and how the palace had been built. And it told a story that no living person had been permitted to read in 4 centuries. When the first emperor's surveyors had come to this valley, the record said, they had found the perfect site for a throne. But when they began to dig the foundations, they broke through the roof of an enormous underground hollow. And in that hollow, curled in the dark, asleep, was a dragon, an earth dragon, one of the oldest, a creature of the deep rivers and the deep stone, so vast that its body ran the entire length of the valley. The surveyors went to the first emperor and they told him, "We must choose another valley. One does not build a house on the back of a sleeping god." And the first emperor looked at the valley, at its rivers, at its mountains, at its perfect, auspicious, once in 1,000 years shape. And the first emperor said no. The first emperor built his palace anyway. He built it carefully. He had his masons lay the foundation stones, not into the dragon's hollow, but across it, like a great stone lid, sealing the creature in. And directly over the dragon's head, over the one point where the beast's skull lay closest to the surface, the first emperor placed his throne. You might ask, why? Why would any man choose to rule from the single most dangerous spot in the entire world? The record gave the first emperor's reason in the first emperor's own words. And his reason was this. A dragon, the first emperor had said, is the source of all rivers, all rain, all the fortune of the harvest. To sit above a sleeping dragon is to sit above the beating heart of the world's good luck. No dynasty will ever be as blessed as the dynasty that rules from the dragon's own skull. And as for the danger, the first emperor had written, the danger is the point. My heir will sit upon that throne, and he will know every hour of every day that if he rules badly, if he grows cruel or greedy or lazy or proud, the dragon beneath him may stir. A ruler who is a little afraid of his own throne is a ruler who will rule well. It was, you have to admit, a magnificent idea. It lasted exactly one generation. The first emperor's son knew about the dragon. His father had walked him down into the deep cellar and made him kneel and put his ear to the warm stone, exactly as Wen had done, so that the son would feel the breathing for himself and never forget it. And the son ruled well. He ruled like a man sitting above a sleeping dragon, which is to say, carefully. But the son's son was only told about the dragon. He was not taken down to hear it. A told thing and a heard thing are not the same thing. And the grandson ruled a little less carefully. And the great-grandson was told about the dragon as a kind of family legend, a colourful story, the way you might be told that your house was haunted, without ever once believing it. And by the fourth emperor, and the fifth, and the sixth, the dragon had become a decoration. Oh, they kept the symbol. They embroidered dragons on every robe. They carved dragons on every pillar. They called the throne the dragon throne, and they called themselves the sons of the dragon, and they said the word 100 times a day. But not one of them for 300 years had gone down into the cold, deep cellar and knelt and put a bare ear to the warm stone and felt in their own bones the thing they were actually sitting on. They had the word dragon in their mouths all day long, and they had entirely forgotten that it was true. Wen rolled up the 400-year-old scroll with shaking hands. He understood now what he had under his feet. He understood what every person in the capital had under their feet. The markets, the temples, the children, the whole bright city, all of it laid like a thin painted crust over the back of a living dragon that had not been properly afraid of in 300 years. And Wen knew something else from his 9 nights in the cellar. He knew that the breathing had been changing. It had grown faster. And on the last 2 nights, the warm stone had not just risen and fallen, it had twitched. So Wen did the responsible thing. He took the scroll to a city magistrate, a powerful, busy, practical man, and he laid it on the desk, and he explained all of it. The warm floor, the breathing, the founding record, the dragon, the quickening, the twitch. The magistrate listened to the whole thing, and then the magistrate smiled, the tired, kind, dismissive smile of a practical man, and he said, "Young man, I have served this throne for 30 years. Every robe in this building has a dragon on it. We speak of the dragon in every ceremony. The dragon is the most familiar thing in my entire life. Do you really expect me to believe that the dragon is, and forgive me, real?" And Wen understood then the true danger. It was not that the people of the capital had never heard of the dragon. It was that they had heard of it so often and so emptily for so long that the word had worn perfectly smooth in their mouths. And a word worn smooth is a word that has stopped meaning anything at all. No one believed Wen. Not the magistrate, not the magistrate superior, not the keeper of the archive, who was mostly concerned that Wen had touched a forbidden scroll. Wen spent 9 days going from official to official, up and up the great ladder of the empire, carrying his 400-year-old warning. And every official gave him the same smooth, tired, dragon-embroidered smile. On the 10th day, the dragon turned over. It did not attack the city. You must understand that. The dragon did not even wake. It simply did what any sleeping creature does after lying too long on one side. In the deep dark, 11 levels down, without malice, without waking, without ever knowing, there was a city up there at all. The dragon rolled over in its sleep. And the back of a dragon is the floor of a capital. The river changed its course in a single afternoon. The hills on the valley's edge folded like cloth. The great palace, the throne room, the golden chair, the 400 years of vermilion and gold cracked from its foundations and came quietly, almost gently, down. The dynasty ended that afternoon. Not in a war, not in a rebellion. It ended because the thing it had been named after, the thing it had embroidered on every sleeve, the thing it had stopped believing in, shifted its weight. Wen lived. He lived because he was, on the morning the ground moved, exactly where a man should be who actually believes there is a dragon under the city. Which is to say, he was outside the valley, on the high road, walking away. And the storytellers say that Wen carried 2 things out of the falling capital. The first was the 400-year-old scroll. He had taken it from the archive on his last night, stolen it, yes, a second capital crime, though there was no longer an empire left to punish him for it. He carried that scroll for the rest of his life, and he read it aloud in every town he passed through to anyone who would listen. The second thing Wen carried out was a sentence, a single sentence that he had worked out on the high road, looking back at the dust where the capital had been. The dragon, Wen would say at the start of every telling, did not destroy the empire, because the empire forgot to fear it. The dragon destroyed the empire, because the empire said its name so many times that the name stopped meaning dragon. They had the word, Wen would say. They never lost the word. They lost the thing the word was standing on. And then Wen would unroll the scroll and show them the faded ink picture, the little palace, the vast coiled beast, and he would say, "Now, let me tell you what your own city is sitting on." There is one last thing to know about this story. We tell it, usually, as a story about an empire, about emperors and thrones and the far-off follies of the powerful and the dead. But the Rivertown storytellers did not end it with the emperor. They ended it with Wen unrolling the scroll and turning to the listeners, to the farmers, the boatmen, the children, to you, and saying, "Now let me tell you what your own city is sitting on." Because every one of us is sitting on a dragon. You have a word in your own mouth, maybe more than one, that you say every single day. I love you. Maybe that one. I believe this. This matters to me. This person is my friend. a word or a name or a promise you have said so many thousands of times that it has worn perfectly, dangerously smooth. And the danger was never that you would stop saying it. The danger is that you will keep saying it easily, every day, embroidered on every sleeve, long, long after you have stopped going down into the cold, deep cellar and kneeling and pressing your bare ear to the warm stone and feeling in your own bones that the thing is still alive under there, still breathing, still real. So go down tonight if you can. Take the word you say most and stop saying it for a moment, and instead go and feel it. Kneel by it. Put your ear to it. Make sure it is still breathing. Because the empire did not fall for lack of the word. It fell for forgetting the dragon was under there.